John Long, and welcome to The Art of Leading. This video is designed for the climber who is familiar with the fundamentals of rope management, equipment, and technique, and who is ready to start leading. We'll focus on the system necessary to execute multi-pitch climbs, what it takes to be both safe and efficient, an in-depth review of the equipment involved, and a close look at the techniques one will encounter on multi-pitch routes. Again, The Art of Leading is based on the Yosemite system, which stresses safety and simplicity. No one can learn to lead by watching a video, but if you can master the material we'll be covering, you'll start off on the right boot. Let's take it from the top.
The exhilaration, the freedom, and the exuberance one gets from moving over difficult rock. These are all amplified many-fold when you step out on the lead. As a leader, you affirm what's sacred to every adventure, because now you're playing for keeps. And all the decisions, when to slide a nut or when to just go for it, is your call. You're the boss, and such freedom can be both exciting and truly rewarding. It can likewise be terrifying, even dangerous, should you be deficient in any of the fundamentals. It might forever be a mystery how a climber of Ron Kaut or Mari Gingrey's prowess can make the nastiest climb look easy. But it's no mystery on how they manage to make that climb safe. It boils down to sound execution of the fundamentals. Fundamentals which, with practice, most anyone can master. We climb to enrich our lives, to experience exciting and novel things, to perhaps learn something about ourselves, and ultimately, to have fun.
You're a first-time leader, and wisely you've chosen a route well within your abilities. Now, before you can rope up, you've got to get there. That's where a guidebook comes into play.
Ideally, the guide clearly states where the route begins, where the difficulties lie, an accurate rating of those difficulties, and the requisite gear for a safe and sane ascent.
But just because a given route's in print, that by no means assures one the information is exactly right.
Yeah, dwindling greenbacks, 512E. Yeah, sometimes those topples are a little thin.
And when the guidebook says just head for the obvious hand crack, well, the hardest part might just be finding the cliff.
Sure, of course I'm sure. It says so right here. Follow the stream bed to Little Cheops and hang a sharp right over narrowing terrain.
She's narrow.
And sometimes it's your own friends who suggest something less than the best advice.
This ain't it. Dead end, babe.
No way, babe. We're not backtracking 12 miles. There it is right there. You can fit through there.
Say where?
Yeah, right there, babe. If you can fit through there, I can.
No way. You couldn't get a pool cue through here. I don't think it's gonna work.
It's gonna work. Now inhale. Ah!
Hey, I think I'm getting stuck. I know I'm stuck.
Easy, babe. I'll get you out of there. Ah!
Ah! Not so hard.
Just relax just for a bit, babe. I got just the thing to get you out of there. Okay, baby. Just relax. Just relax.
What the hell's that? No, no, no. No, no.
If something seems wrong, it probably is. Just use your common sense.
You need to bring more to the cliff than just the gear. A great climb starts with a realistic goal and a positive attitude.
Oftentimes, the most perilous part of a climb is simply getting started. For if you fall, you hit the ground. A good move is to climb no higher than where you feel comfortable jumping off. Once there, set a good nut. That should free your mind to enjoy what you're there for, the climbing.
Off-width, also known as off-size, is called so because no part of your body fits the crack just right. Consequently, we're left to use ingenious stacking, levering, and counter-pressure techniques. The idea is to alternatively lodge the feet and the upper body. When the feet are secure, we creep the torso up for another purchase. Foot stacking and the standard heel and toe jam are two useful techniques. The upper body is generally secured with several variations of the basic arm bar, which uses opposing leverage, the back of the elbow and the palm of the hand. The hand which is not busy arm barring is generally clasping the lip of the crack, providing additional leverage. If there's one thing to keep in mind, it's to climb slowly and never resign yourself to thrashing.
Like any other sport, the right strategy is half the battle. Since no two climbs are precisely alike, there are few hard and fast rules a leader can apply. There are, however, several standard tricks which all good leaders employ. Like a chess master, the leader must read the rock, plan his moves as far in advance as possible, pick the right sequence, and execute it fluidly. When you're heading for a crack section, that's when you want additional protection, regardless of all the other nuts you might have in below you. The trick here is to stop on a foothold, or in the least strenuous spot. All this requires the leader to be alert, looking ahead, planning the sequence, recognizing the difficulties before they're on them. Now, in some cases, you're going to be hanging on for keeps, trying to get that nut in. In others, like here, there's no protection whatsoever, save for that. So if you want to make the climb, you're just going to have to go for it.
Of course, unprotected climbing is a calculated risk requiring both courage and a dash of madness. As a beginning leader, if you have any doubts about making a given section and the fall looks dangerous, it's best to back off and return later when you well know your capabilities.
Ultimately, it boils down to one's judgment. How accurate is your strategy? How you read the rock? How you plot your moves relative to the available protection? And when the protection is a little thin, how resolved are you to make that climb? Fist jamming, though a rarely used technique, you're bound to run into it if you ever make it to Yosemite or the desert areas.
As with all climbing, it's your feet rather than your arms that should take the bulk of your weight. Fist quacks readily accept your feet, but pick your spots carefully. Look for constrictions and torque each foot until it feels solid. And whatever size the crack, the first order of business is to protect it. Then you take a shot at the climbing. A video is incapable of showing you just how to place nuts, but what with all the new camming devices, a fist crack is amongst the most easily protected. The crack is wide and often uniform, perfect for those cams. All jamming entails placing the hand inside the crack, then expanding the hand. Because the fist can be expanded very little, it's important to work for the best jam, finding that place where the fist fits tight to begin with, then expanding it to make the jam solid. Remember, it's easy to let the fist rotate in the crack, which can result in some very painful abrasions.
So Doc, what are we looking at here?
Well, Logger, man, we got a call about an hour ago in the meat wagon. By the time we got there wasn't much we could do. This chump was booking up a fist crack, crashing like a mackerel out of water. By the time we got there, his hands were gone.
Gone?
Gone!
Best to watch how you set those jams. A hand crack is the Cadillac of all crack climbing. The technique is quickly learned, and a good hand jam is secure as the most bulbous bucket. Again, the experienced climber will pick and choose his jams carefully, finding that spot where the hand fits most naturally. Because hand cracks are relatively secure, it's often easy to stop and place protection. Above all, try and stop in the least strenuous spot, and avoid plugging up the best hand jam with your protection. Also, when moving past your protection, make certain you don't entangle your foot in the nut. The inverted hand jam, where the thumb is down, is a good way to get added torque for tight jams. Just the same, the thumb up position remains the standard technique. In even a parallel-sided crack, a climber rarely places the self-same jam one after the other. But whatever the sequence, the thumb is always working overtime. The feet must be jammed themselves. Twist the ankle, slide in the toe, then twist it back towards the horizontal to lock it down. Try and climb smoothly and efficiently, using just enough strength to remain secure, but no more.
A good hand crack will literally swallow a climber's hand. And like fist jamming, hand jamming can result in unsightly wounds even if your technique is perfect. A popular practice is to tape up.
No matter how you wrap it, it's the back of the hand that you're trying to protect. And don't wrap it too tight. You'll cut off the circulation and make it that much harder to flex, which greatly reduces a jam's effectiveness. And don't over-tape. Come on. And don't forget, used tape is nothing less than trash.
Hey there, buddy. don't leave that stuff lying around. That's bad form.
Now, buddy, let's see you eat that dog. The 1970s can well be called the decade of thin cracks. The bulk of the most difficult routes of that decade were thin. Protecting a thin crack is often the most difficult task, and surely the most important, since thin cracks are usually very insecure. Both the actual climbing and the act of protecting that climbing requires the leader to be extremely aware of the smallest nuances of the crack. It's often a matter of millimeters, and finding the correct sequence of finger jams is essential. It takes a keen eye to spot the best place for the protection, and a lot of experience to get exactly the right nut off the rack. Remember this: make sure your hands and feet are set before you try and stop to protect. You must feel the crack for the best jams, because no matter how strong those guns are, they'll soon burn out if your footwork is not precise. The thinner the crack, the more necessary it is to get your weight over your feet. And because the nut will sometimes take the best slot for the fingers, the leader will often place the nut below his hands, at head level. When a leader leaves the security of a crack out onto the open face, he's leaving behind the ready opportunities to protect himself. That's why a leader will sometimes opt to stack the protection, placing 2, 3, or however many nuts he feels is necessary to secure the climbing overhead. He'll often use quick draws to reduce the possibility of rope drag. A quick draw is a short piece of webbing, either sewn or tied, which serves as a short runner or sling. When you're clawing up some bald face, the last thing you want is the rope holding you back.
Slack!
You got it!
I said slack, you knucklehead!
The name's Mac. The pot licker. Dumbo couldn't pull that rope now. All he needed was a couple of these.
Slack!
American climbs tend to follow straight lines, but not always. A European technique of belaying on 2 9mm ropes instead of a single 11 has several advantages when routes tend to wander. The double rope comes into its own when the available protection is all over the place, whereas even with 100 runners, a single lead rope would cause desperate rope drag.
The double rope is handy indeed for the second who has to traverse between protection points.
Hey, Jack!
It's Mac.
Slack!
On the black,
The black's in the crack!
check the rack.
Slack!
It can get confusing. Best to try it on an easy climb first. Many climbers prefer the security of a good crack, but just as many can't wait to enjoy the sweet science of face climbing. While the steeper face climbs require fearsome strength, with precision, grace, balance, and mental control we generally equate with face climbing.
Few things look more daunting and involved than a climber scaling a bald face. In reality, face climbing is the most natural form of climbing. And with a little practice, all the complicated-looking moves will come as natural as your next breath.
Let's watch a master at work. No matter how pumped you are, if the protection's good and you're a gamer, you'll go for it.
Anyone who works with precision, a surgeon, a diamond cutter, a pool hustler, the good ones all know one thing: how to relax. There's nothing more important to the face climber than relaxing.
The tense climber overgrips and his fingers tire quickly. His legs tremble when they aren't tired.
And worse still, he gets tunnel vision. He either won't or can't see beyond his hands. And you'll never get the right sequence if you're not looking ahead, and you can't look ahead unless you're relaxed. First comes body position. Ideally, your torso should always be vertical. This way, gravity puts your weight directly over your feet, and it's your feet you want to climb on. Of course, on the really bleak slate, it boils down to raw power. Once you get to this level, you won't be needing this video.
As mentioned, you want to keep that weight on your feet to save arm strength, which goes quickly. Now, it's a pretty helpless task trying to teach you face climbing while you're sitting on that divan. But there are some basics that you should be aware of. First, face climbing is a matter of millimeters. The holes are often puny at best, so you've got to be very precise with placing your feet.
Which is impossible if you're not relaxed. You'll be wobbling and fretting, and you'll just kick your foot towards the hold. No. You pick the hold, and you carefully place your boot on it.
Likewise, when you go to step on the hold, don't jump on it. That's the best way for that foot to come skating off. Rather, transfer your weight very gingerly, trying to keep the boot from moving on the hold. And whether you're edging or smearing, you'll generally do so on the inside part of the big toe. That's where both strength and feeling are located. However, a climber who knows how to use the outside edge of his boot enjoys a big advantage. The outside edge can stick to the merest nothing, and with little strength, since the bones rather than the muscles of the foot absorb the weight.
Now for the hands. Ideally, we'd all be Martians with those big suckers on our hands, but we're not. So to overcome the problems of sweat and grip, most climbers opt to use gymnastic chalk.
Gymnastic chalk is very useful when the temperature brings on sweaty hands. The drawbacks are that chalk is unsightly, and it tends to map out the sequence for future parties. For better or for worse, chalk has become an accepted evil in modern climbing.
There are as many ways to clasp holes as there are different kinds of holes, but there seems to be 3 basic positions.
The hook hold, where one pulls straight down on the fingers. This posture is only used on very minuscule holds, can be fearsomely painful, and neglects your strongest digit, your thumb. But it's useful all the same. The standard crank position is when the finger pads are laid over the hold, and the last 2 joints are bent at a 45-degree angle relative to the hold. The thumb is then wrapped over the index finger, and you're set to pull the walls down. On severely rounded holds, you want to get as much of the finger pad on the hold as possible, and the claw hold works best here. Since you don't enjoy the stability of locked joints with the claw hold, the forearms take all the load, so the claw hold is usually the most strenuous way to clasp a hold. Another useful and sometimes essential technique is mantling. It comes into play when you gain a hold, usually but not always big, which you must first mount, then step directly upon. In its simplest form, you place your hands on the hold. Cock the elbow, press it out, and step on up. Mantling takes practice, but no matter how proficient you get, remember this: a difficult mantle is hard to reverse, and once you're committed, there's no changing your mind. A mantle puts one in an awkward position, and if there is no hold or reach once the mantle is pressed out, you're liable to find yourself in a piece of trouble. So if you have to mantle, look for a hold to go for once the mantle is started, and be aggressive about pushing it out.
As a leader, you've got to keep in mind all of these techniques and worry about protecting yourself. Now, it's totally unrealistic for me to try and describe how to protect a face climb, but there's several rules of thumb worth mentioning. First, never pass up an obvious place to throw a nut in. And second, whenever you come across fixed protection, a bolt, a nut, a piton, never automatically assume it's bomb-proof. Check it carefully, and always back it up, if possible. So what do we have? We have you relaxed as a Zen monk with the bulk of your weight over the smooth-soled shoes. You're moving fluidly from one hold to the next, throwing in nuts like there's no tomorrow. All the while, you're looking ahead, planning the best sequence, climbing with control and deliberation towards the next protection. Then you hit the steep stuff, and it's a different game altogether. You're entering the realm of power climbing.
The free climbing revolution of the early 70s was concerned with free climbing the big walls and refining the art of thin crack climbing. In the 80s, the paradigm shifted to the overhanging and bereft faces, and the art of power face climbing came into its own. And the best way to learn power climbing is to go bouldering. While the technique and power accrued from bouldering directly applies to rope climbing, most find bouldering so much darn fun they consider it a sport unto itself. There is simply no better way to refine your technique than bouldering, where one can try the impossible and where the only consequence of failure is to dust yourself off and try again. Should the landing be bad or the problem too high, either use a spotter or rig a top rope. Remember, of course, that whenever you fall off, you hit the ground. The most common form of climbing injuries occur from people toppling off boulders and twisting or breaking ankles. There is nothing more important to safe climbing than a bomb-proof belay. Without it, you have nothing, an according disaster. With it, you have a controlled situation where there is no reason anyone should get hurt. On multi-pitch climbs, the belay must be rigged in virtually countless different ways, but there are several basic principles which any belay should adhere to. Save for a ponderosa pine, never belay from a single piece of protection. The most common belays are rigged in vertical cracks, and don't forget this, always place a nut for the upward pull. When rigging a belay in a horizontal crack, equalize the anchor whenever possible. An accepted method is just this. In general, a three-piece anchor is the minimum acceptable as bomb-proof. If there's any doubt, place another nut and another until there's no doubt whatsoever. Always tie in with 2 carabiners and always oppose the gates. Sometimes, equalizing the anchor is a tricky piece of work. The clove hitch is a handy knot here, for it's more easily adjusted. With hanging belays, it's best to belay through the anchor, so the system, rather than your body, takes the weight of a potential fall. For the climber who seconds the pitch, it is their job to remove all the protection and to re-rack it in a neat and orderly fashion. Racking is a matter of personal choice, but generally, carabiners come first, followed by nuts of increasing sizes. For the carabiners harboring those nuts, always rack them gate out for easy access. In the last few years, there's been an explosion of new high-tech crack gadgets, many of which have rendered traditional modes of protection almost obsolete. Even a professional climber finds he must stay up on the literature to keep abreast of the new gear, and always take the opportunity to tinker with a new piece of gear a friend or an acquaintance might have. A good belay requires assiduous attention to the rope, and sometimes when the going is slow, a belayer's mind can wander extravagantly.
Watch me.
I've been watching you for 45 minutes. You haven't even budged.
Just watch me. Close.
Yeah.
Cruel fate. Where the only solace is a dog-in gar. Not too long, but big around. Just watch that belay. Close. As mentioned, most climbs follow straight lines. However, when a route traverses, it is the leader's responsibility to place enough protection so the second doesn't die should he fall during the traverse. In this instance, the leader hasn't placed anything. For the poor sap that has to follow this pitch, should he fall, he'll be in for a big-time swing. Here, the leader has been more conscientious, placing a nut directly off the belay. Much safer for the man that follows. Once the second has reached the belay, the first order of business is to tie themselves off to the anchor. Then the belayer takes the belay off. You study the climbing overhead. Get your partner's opinion and construct a rack which you feel is appropriate to the next pitch. Your rack should ideally consist of everything you'll need to secure atomic protection, and not one piece more. Who wants to lug stuff you'll never use? The gear nut, that's who. He's got gear enough to solo mount Thor, which is the last thing he'll ever do, since that would involve using and possibly scratching some of that gear.
Okay, you got me on?
Yeah, you're on.
Switching leads is a simple and safe procedure, providing you do this. Make certain you are on belay before you unclip from the anchor. Once unclipped, immediately clip your rope through the anchor, so should you fall, the anchor, rather than your partner's body, will absorb at least the bulk of your weight. Of course, a belay is not what it should be if it can't withstand the longest possible fall. But you'll never want to fall directly on the belay because of the real possibility of falling on your belayer. So once you leave the belay, try and get a good nut in as quickly as possible. Also be aware that falls with only 8 to 10 feet of rope out are the hardest on the rope. Owing to the dynamic properties of a Perlon rope, the more rope you have out, the less the shock, since there is more rope to absorb the fall. Liebacking is possibly the most strenuous and thrilling technique in all of climbing.
It's also the quickest way to find hell in a handbasket. Owing to great opposing pressures, should you fall, you'll fire off like you're spring-loaded. Liebacking has been called the technique of no technique, but that's hardly the case.
Liebacking is self-explanatory, but heed the following points. Many hard liebacks are exercises in trying not to hinge off. Though more strenuous, it's often better to keep your feet high, increasing the opposing pressure between hands and feet. On a straight-on or flake lieback, scour the face for footholds. It's on a foothold where you'll want to stop and place protection. There's nothing like swinging into a bold lieback. You can span amazing rock, and it's thrilling to feel your own power. But don't forget, the grim liebacks put you in a volatile position. So much so, there's a special place for the few who cast off without setting that bomb-proof nut.
They didn't bother with the nuts.
Chimneying is most often considered a dreadful technique, far from elegant, and often little more than a grunt. But with a little practice, even chimneying can be fun.
Occasionally you're going to run into a chimney system that is so shallow you can't get in the back. These are called flares, and unless properly done, are one of the worst climbing experiences that you can run into. The trick is to decide which way you're going to face when you're in these, and usually the decision is based upon what side of the wall has the best footholds. Now, just like in chimneying, the basic position is to have the back against one wall and the feet on the other. As you proceed up, the thing to remember is always move very securely, very slowly, and make sure the feet and the hands are placed exactly where you want them. Climb very smoothly and slowly. Now, as soon as you get up to where the flare pinches down, and you have to climb on the outside of it, the normal technique is to use an arm bar, which is a combination of pressure on the back of the elbow and the palm here placed as such. So again, when you're doing these moves, the first and foremost thing to remember is don't thrash. Try to be as secure and solid with each foot placement and the placement of the arms as you possibly can. My feet again. Place the arm bar. You've got it.
A route of any length is bound to have some bad rock. A hold, a flake, even a whole pitch. Tread gently on any suspect rock. Test the holds. But always bear in mind that anything you pull off could hit both the rope and your belayer. Warn your belayer when you encounter any suspect rock. And whenever dislodging anything, make sure to yell, "Rock!" Though rare in popular climbing areas, rockfall is not unheard of, and the consequences are usually serious. Completing your climb, executing your plan to the letter, safely, meeting a stiff challenge, and walking away with a feeling of being 200% alive. That's where it's at for a leader. That's when you know why they call rock climbing the world's greatest sport.
Most veterans admit the real fun doesn't begin until you jump out on the sharp end, on the lead. It takes a natural athlete and bulldog determination to become a world-class leader, but most anyone with knowledge and desire can experience the freedom, the thrill, and the feeling of command that comes with leading a challenging pitch. Leading is as safe or as dangerous as you choose to make it. And if we've said anything in this video, it's that the safe leader is sound in his fundamentals. He's quick to place a nut. His belays are rock solid, and his moves are deliberate and calculated. From here on, it's your call. And have the time of your life. Happy climbing.